viewers, welcome to Love and Life's Journey DIY. I'm Chantel. Thank you so much for being here. For this video, I have compiled over 25 of my favorite spring and Easter DIYs into this one mega video. So it's a little longer, but there is a ton of inspiration here, and I will put the timestamps to all of the projects in the description box, so if you want to jump to a certain one, it will be much easier for you. And this video does contain a few DIYs from way back in my early days of YouTube, so have a little grace when you watch those sections because I was just learning the ins and outs of YouTube. But I think those projects are worth including, and some of them are still some of my favorites. So I hope you enjoy this mega video of spring and Easter inspiration. For this project, I will be using these two pallet signs from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using these two coasters that I found in the kitchen section, some spring florals, and also this gray and white cotton twine. Going to remove the label off of the back. I love how easy these come off because usually they do not come off very easily without using some heat or something. So then I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and just go over each of the pallet signs to kind of clean them up and smooth them out. Next, I'm going to paint my signs using this gray color. This is just acrylic craft paint, and I know you're probably thinking gray is not a very spring-like color, but hang with me because this is gonna work out just fine. So I'm just giving the palette a couple of coats of the gray paint, and I'm painting front and back and everywhere in between. So now I am using some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I am dry brushing on the front of my palette sign just to tone it down and give it a little bit more of that farmhouse worn look. Next, I'm going to take the coaster and the gray and white cotton twine, and I am going to wrap the cotton twine around the edge, all the way around the coaster, just using some hot glue to secure that as I go all the way around. And I went around this 3 times just to cover the edge of the coaster and kind of give it a little bit of a framed look. And I did this on both of the coasters. Next, I'm going to glue my coaster to the center of the pallet sign. I'm going to use some E6000 on this because the coaster is fairly heavy, and then I'll also use some of the hot glue. I like to use Gorilla Glue sticks in my hot glue gun just because they're a little bit stronger of a hold, and so that's what I'm using. And the combination of the E6000 and those Gorilla Glue sticks are really going to hold this in place. I was originally going to add some of those pink florals to this, but I actually liked it better without, so I just left them off. And see, what did I tell you? Doesn't this look so beautiful? And it's still perfect for spring, even though I used that gray color. This next project is super simple. For this, you will need one of these hanging terrarium planters from Dollar Tree, some type of moss. I'm using some reindeer moss that I picked up at Dollar Tree. I'll also be using one of these moss bunnies from the Easter section. And I'll be using some of these cherry blossoms from this floral stem. And I'll be using some pink sheer ribbon. You can use any type of ribbon or twine that you want to hang this with. So there are 2 styles of the bunnies that come in that package of moss bunnies. I'm going to be using the taller one so that it stands up a little bit higher in the terrarium. And I'm going to be securing that to the bottom just using some hot glue. I'm putting the bunny right in the center. Then I'm going to fill in around the bunny with some of the moss, and I'm not gluing the moss in or anything. I'm just poking it back in around the bunny and around the front. And the little hole in the side works really great to use a stick or something to kind of move the moss around to get it where you want it. Then I'm just going to snip off some of these little cherry blossom flowers, and I am leaving the stems a little bit longer on some of them because I want them to kind of stand up around the bunny or kind of behind the bunny. So I'm using the stems to kind of hold them in place, and I'm just going to place those inside with the bunny. Then I'm going to cut a piece of ribbon to use as a hanger, and I'll just put that through the hole in the top of the planter and tie it off, and this project is finished. For this next project, I will be using one of these terracotta pots. They come in a 2-pack from Dollar Tree. I'll be using a few rocks to use as weight in the bottom of my pot. I'm using a little bit of floral foam. I'm also going to be using this wired jute twine from Dollar Tree, as well as this little Easter berry garland, and that's the only thing I think I'm using that's not from Dollar Tree. I think I got that at Hobby Lobby. And then I'll be using some green moss and some little pink florals. Whenever I'm going to paint a terracotta pot, I like to spray it with a sealer, and this helps it not soak up the paint so much, so you use less paint. Once that sealer is dry, I am going to paint my pot, and I am painting the bottom of the pot this kind of sagey green color, and it's just an acrylic craft paint that I had on hand. And then I'm going to be painting the rim of the pot in the ivory colored chalk paint. So now I'm taking some of the ivory paint and dry brushing that onto the green paint just to soften that up again and give it a little bit of a worn look. And then I'm going to take a dark brown acrylic paint, or actually this is a chalk paint, and I am going to do the same thing with the dry brushing on the white part of the pot, because the white looks so like stark and new compared to that green that I have kind of distressed. So I want to add a little bit of distressing to the top of the pot as well, so that it all is cohesive. I did also add a little bit of the brown on the green section of the pot, but just a very little bit. And if you are a newer crafter, dry brushing just means that you put a very small amount of paint on your brush. Usually the brush is dry, and then you lightly brush it across your project just to leave little remnants of paint to give it that kind of streaked look. I'm going to finish preparing my pot by adding some of those rocks in the bottom for a little bit of weight, and then I'm going to put my floral foam on the top of that, and I want the floral foam to sit just a little bit below the rim of the pot. Next, I'm going to take my wired twine, and if you can't find this, you can use any type of heavy wire, and you could even wrap twine around a wire to get the twine look, but if you're able to find the wired twine at Dollar Tree, then that will save you some steps. So I am taking the wired twine and I am doubling it, so I have 2 strands, and I am twisting it together just to make a thicker piece. So basically I used the whole roll, I cut it in half, I put those 2 pieces together and twisted them together. Then starting in the center of my piece, I am going to start forming the shape of a heart. And you just have to work with this to kind of get your heart even and the shape that you want, but since the wire twine is very easy to work with. This is not hard. It just takes a little bit of patience. And then when I'm satisfied with my heart, and just so you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but once it is the shape that you like, then I'm taking the ends and twisting this. So you want to leave some at the bottom so that you will have basically like a stem, because we're making kind of like a topiary. So I twist those together so I have a nice thick stem. And then I'm going to use a pair of wire cutters and just snip off the end. So I would say I left about 6 inches or so at the bottom of my heart. And of course, part of that is going to be stuck down into the floral foam. So before I actually attach my heart into that floral foam, I am going to embellish it. So I am using this beaded garland. I did get this at Hobby Lobby. I have seen these types of garlands at Dollar Tree, but I don't know if I've ever seen them in these colors. But you can look and see what you can find. You could use just some of the floral stems that are the berries. You could use various things to embellish this, but I'm going to wrap this around the twine heart, and I'm just going to wrap it kind of loosely. Then I'm going to snip off some of these little pink flowers, and I'm going to kind of weave these into that berry garland, and I'm doing them a little bit sparse. That's the look that I'm going for. You can add as few or as many as you want. And I put them in kind of going up one side, and then I started again at the bottom and went up the other side, and I just added a little bit of hot glue to secure them as I went, but I wanted them to look like they were kind of growing up from the bottom. So that's why I didn't just go all the way around the heart in one direction, because I didn't want the flowers to look like they were growing down on one side. So as you can see, I am recycling a piece of floral foam, but I used a stick to poke down in the center of the foam, and then I am going to add some hot glue into that hole and then push my heart down inside the hole, and then I am going to hold it in place until it sets and actually add a little bit more hot glue on the sides just to make sure it is good and secure. Then I'm going to take some of this green moss, and I got this at Walmart. You can get all kinds of moss at Dollar Tree. This is just a little bit of a different texture. It's a green Spanish moss, so I liked it, but you can use any moss for this. And I'm going to add a little hot glue to the top of the floral foam and just press my moss on top of that. So I think it's looking pretty good, but one final touch, I'm going to add a little bit of jute twine around the white rim of the pot. And I just wrapped this twine around a couple of times and then tied a real simple bow, and I just secured it with a little bit of hot glue. So super easy, and it just finishes this off and ties it all together. This would be a great project to do for Valentine's, and then you could leave it out all spring as well. For this next DIY, I am using this 3.5 by 5 inch picture frame from Dollar Tree, of course, and one of these glass candlesticks. I'm also going to be using a couple of these fabric roses, and these are actually burlap roses. These are new at Dollar Tree. And so are these laser cut or die cut little wooden embellishments, and these are so cool. I love these. They have them in a ton of different styles, so be watching for these. For my first step, I'm going to be spray painting this candlestick. I'm using a satin heirloom white just because that's what I had on hand. And while my spray paint is drying, I am going to prepare my frame and get it all embellished. So I'm just removing the stickers. I'm going to remove the stand off of the back, and this is on there pretty good, but I was able to pull the stand off easily, and then I just had to use a pair of pliers to get that metal piece off of the back that was holding it on. So I'm going to open up the frame and remove that paper and clean the glass, and I printed off this little Hello Spring sign that I created on canva.com. I will put the link to that in the description box so that you can go there. They do have a free version of their site that you can use to create different graphics, and so I created this and I just printed it off on my printer, and I'm going to put that inside my frame. Next, I'm going to add a couple of these burlap roses to the top corner of my frame, and they do stand a little bit tall, and so I felt like they were a little bit awkward, and so I ended up kind of smashing them down and kind of roughing them up a little bit to make them a little shorter, and just to make them look, I don't know, a little bit more realistic, I guess. I don't know. I do really like these burlap roses though. They're perfect for farmhouse projects. And I have seen in some Dollar Tree hauls where they do carry just the natural burlap color and also a red burlap color, but my store only had the pink ones. And I'm gluing one of those butterflies in the bottom corner, and I love how that looks. So now that the spray paint is dry on my candlestick, I don't really like the finish of it. That satin finish is too shiny, so I'm taking some chalk paint and going over the top of that. And I have found when you're painting things like plastic or glass, sometimes if you spray paint them, that will adhere to it better than just if you just use chalk paint or acrylic paint. And so by putting the spray paint down first, then that gives my chalk paint something to attach to better. And then I'm going to take some of my brown paint and dry brush on this just to give it that aged look. I decided I needed to put a little bit of something down inside the top of the candlestick, so I'm taking a little bit of brown Spanish moss and just poking it down inside there. You can get this type of moss at Dollar Tree. It doesn't take very much, so I'm just pushing that down inside there. You don't want to cover up the rim of the candlestick because we need that to glue our picture frame to. And that is the next step, so I am going to use a little bit of E6000 as well as a little bit of hot glue and attach my picture frame to the top of the candlestick. And you do have to hold this in place until the hot glue sets up because it wants to tip over, so you just gotta make sure that it is secure before you let go. And to finish this one off, I'm going to wrap some twine around it as well. I'm going to wrap it about 3 times around the center of the candlestick, tie a simple little bow, and that finishes it off, and I love this. I am so happy with how this turned out. I'm going to be using these spring felt coasters. These are also new at Dollar Tree this year, and I think they are really fun. I will also be using 6 of the large paint stirring sticks. These are called 5-gallon stir sticks. I got these at Walmart in a 3-pack for a little over $1. You can get them at all home improvement stores. And then I'm also using this little chalkboard sign. I'm repurposing it from a different project that it already has said welcome spring, so it's perfect. I'm going to take 5 of the stir sticks and I'm going to measure 15 inches from the narrow end of the stick and mark all 5 of these sticks so that I can cut them off. For the last stir stick, I'm going to measure 9 inches and mark that, and then another 9 or at 18 inches and mark that, because I'll be cutting this, basically cutting the end off and then cutting that stick in half. I'm going to use my miter box and saw to cut these sticks, and this is a great tool. I'll link it in the description box below if you're interested in it, but it's great for crafting. I know I always get comments about how there's a lip on the bottom of the miter box so that you can put it on the edge of like a desk or a counter to help hold it steady. But guys, there is no lip on the edge of my miter box on the bottom, and so I use this shelf liner from Dollar Tree to put under it. It helps keep it from sliding around, and so that's one reason I don't put it on the edge of my desk, and the other reason is so that it is in the center of my frame for filming. But I appreciate all your comments, so I love to hear your suggestions and your tips, so keep them coming. Once I have all my pieces cut, I'm going to sand down those cut edges so that they're nice and smooth. And now I'm going to paint all of my stir sticks with the ivory chalk paint, and I actually did all 5 of the long sticks and 1 of the shorter sticks that goes across the bottom, and then I ended up not painting the bottom of most of those sticks because I wanted the glue to adhere well. And so I'm just using the hot glue to glue 1 on each end and make sure the bottom is flush. Then I'm going to space the other 3 in between, and if you haven't figured it out yet, we're making a picket fence, and so once those are spaced and neat, and I just eyeball this. I am not like one of those crafters that measures everything. I just eyeball it. I happen to think a little bit of imperfection is what makes handmade crafts so great. But if you are a perfectionist, there is nothing wrong with that. Go ahead and get out your tape measure and measure away. So now I'm going to put my other cross piece on across the top, but I'm going to actually put it behind the picket fence, pickets, I guess that's what you call them. And I didn't paint this one because I knew I'd only need to paint where it shows through on the front. So I am measuring down about 4 inches or so, and I'm going to do that on both sides just because I want to have this be straight. So, you know, I just talked about not measuring stuff, and here I am measuring stuff. But there are some things that it is important to measure. And then I'm going to attach that to each of the pickets with my hot glue, and that will make this fence nice and sturdy. Then I'm going to come in with some of the ivory chalk paint and just fill in those little sections that are showing through the pickets. And if you know me, of course you know I'm going to add some dry brushing. So I'm using my brown paint again, and I'm going to dry brush this just to give it that aged look. So these felt coasters come in a package of 4, and they're just tied together with this ribbon that makes them look really cute in the package. So I'm going to remove that ribbon so that I can take the coasters apart. And at first I was thinking I was just going to be using 1 of the coasters for each of the flowers, but it seemed really flat and it didn't have enough dimension. So I was trying to figure out kind of how to make that look a little bit more 3-dimensional, and so I decided I'm going to use 2 of each color of the flowers, and then I'm going to glue them together with a little bit of hot glue. So as I was arranging these, I got the idea to, you guessed it, dry brush on these flowers. And so I wanted to make them look a little bit more farmhouse and mute the color just a little bit. I love the colors, but I was going for more of a farmhouse vibe, so I added a little bit of the ivory chalk paint to these flowers. Then I'm attaching them to my picket fence with some hot glue. And then I'm going to hang my little welcome spring sign over the top of one of the pickets. And I didn't want it to hang just straight, which is what it wanted to do, so I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the back of that just to hold it at an angle. And then I'm going to take a little bit of thicker jute twine and tie a knot in one end. Going to glue that to the back side of my sign on one side, and then figure out how long I want this hanger to be. Tie a knot on the other end, glue it on the other side, and then my sign is all finished. Next, I'm going to show you how I create 3 different looks for this rabbit using this one tinsel rabbit from Dollar Tree. Besides the rabbit, you'll also need 1 roll of this green burlap wired ribbon, 1 package of this natural raffia, some green moss. This is a big bag of Spanish moss that I got at Walmart for about $6. And they also carry the forest moss in a smaller package for about $3. Either one of these would work, or if you can find green moss at Dollar Tree, you can use that as well. The first step is to remove the bow and all of the tinsel off of the rabbit to expose the frame underneath. I left the ribbon hanger on the back of my frame, and then I took my green burlap ribbon and I just secured that with a little hot glue and then wrapped it all around my wreath form. And if you don't overlap it too much, you will be able to cover the head and the body with just 1 roll of ribbon. Next, I'm going to take my raffia and I am going to just use 1 strand of this and tie it at the base of one of the ears, and then I am going to wrap this around the ears. Now, it was a little bit challenging to cover up those knobs on the frame, so I was wishing kind of after the fact that I had snipped off those knobs with a pair of wire cutters, so you might want to do that. But I was able to wrap enough raffia around those to disguise them, and you don't see them once you're finished. But it probably would be easier to just snip them off with some wire cutters. At the tops of the ears, I did find it easier to kind of go several different directions with the raffia and secure it in several places with the hot glue to cover those. And now that that's finished, I'm ready for the messy part. So I like to use a box to put my moss in. This just kind of helps to contain the mess. And then I am going to just put my rabbit frame on top of that and then just start covering it with the moss and a little hot glue. And it works best to kind of cut some smaller sections of the moss and work in smaller sections, but you just want to make sure your whole head and body is covered with the green moss. Or maybe I should say, make sure the bunny's head and body are covered with the green moss. Then once my moss is all attached to the frame, I'm going to just trim it up just to make it look a little bit neater. So now I'm going to show you 3 different ways to embellish this to give it 3 different looks. I really like this simplistic look that is kind of a minimalist look. I'm only going to take a few strands of the raffia and tie it in a bow. And then I'm going to add that at the neck of the bunny, and that's all I'm going to do for this first look. For the second look, I am going to show you how to add a little bit more Easter color to the rabbit. So if you like more of the pastel Easter colors, this will probably be the one that you like. I'm going to take this Dollar Tree ribbon and just create a bow for my bunny. And I'm doing this so that it looks more like a bow tie. So I'm just doing a big loop and then a small piece to go around the center of that loop, and I'll just attach that to the neck of the bunny. And then I'm going to take some of these Dollar Tree speckled eggs and I'm going to glue 3 of these down at the bottom of the bunny so it looks like they're just sitting there next to the bunny. For the last look, I'm using some of these small succulents that you can find in the pots at Dollar Tree. And I'm also going to be using some of the reindeer moss that you can get at Dollar Tree. This is a little bit lighter color green and just a different texture. I'm going to start by taking the succulents out of the pots, and they just pull right out of the styrofoam. And once I have them all out of the pots, then I'm just going to use a pair of wire cutters and snip off the stems. Then I'm just going to arrange the succulents around the body and the head of the rabbit, and then I'll glue them down. Then for the last step, I'm just going to take some of the reindeer moss and add it around the rabbit in different places, kind of tucking it underneath the succulents. And here you have the third look with the succulents and moss. Next, I'm going to be creating this fun Easter egg decor. For this project, I picked up these candlesticks from Hobby Lobby. There are 5 in a package and you need 6 for this project, so I did have to buy 2 packages, but I did get them on sale. And I'm going to be using some of the speckled eggs from Dollar Tree as well as some rub-on transfer letters. If you don't have the rub-on transfers, you could also use stencils and paint, or even stencils with a black Sharpie marker. I'll also be using some green Spanish moss, some jute twine, and some ivory colored chalk paint. The first thing I'm going to do is take 6 of those wood candlesticks and I'm going to give them a coat of paint with that ivory chalk paint. While my candlesticks are drying, I'm going to cut out the letters from my rub-on transfers, and I am spelling out the word Easter. Before I put my letters on my eggs, I'm going to arrange the eggs in the order that I want them to be for the colors, and that way I make sure to get the correct letter on the correct egg. Most of the eggs have a spot that has less of the speckles on it, so that's where I'm putting the letters. And just a tip here with these rub-on transfers, the letter is very sticky and it's not very easy to reposition. It sticks to your surface right away, so make sure you get it placed where you want it the first time. and you just press it on and then rub over it with your fingernail, and this works really well and they stick really well. I didn't have any trouble at all with these Dollar Tree rub-on transfer letters. Once the paint on the candlesticks is dry, I'm going to wrap some of the twine around about 3 times around the top and then just tie it in a nice little bow. And I'm going to repeat that on all 6 of the candlesticks. Then I'm going to take just a little bit of the moss and put that on top of the candlestick, and then using some hot glue, put some inside the candlestick and press that moss down inside. I would recommend using one of those finger protectors from Dollar Tree so you don't burn your finger. And then I'm just gluing the egg on the top. And that's it. Look how cute this is. And actually I saw a set similar to this selling online for $38, and I paid a whole lot less to create this, and I think it's super cute. My next project is this Easter egg wreath. For this, I will be using one of these wreaths from Dollar Tree. They call it a bamboo wreath, but it doesn't really look like bamboo to me, but this will be perfect for this project. I'll also be using 3 packages of the speckled eggs from Dollar Tree, as well as 2 packages of these smaller styrofoam eggs. And to finish it off, I'll be using this Easter garland I picked up at Hobby Lobby. It was on sale for $1.79. And then I will also be using some of the leaves or greenery from this floral stem from Dollar Tree. So first I am going to take my larger speckled eggs and I am going to glue them around the wreath, just spacing them fairly equally and kind of turning them in different directions. And I actually did 6 of the larger eggs at a time, and then I filled in with some of the smaller eggs, and I was just trying to make sure that I had enough eggs to go all the way around the wreath. So you can see here that I'm just pulling the little ribbons out of the top of those little egg ornaments, and they just come out really easy, and then I'm hot gluing them on the wreath as well. Next I'm going to take that Easter garland and I'm going to secure it on the back of the wreath, and then I'm going to wrap it very loosely around the wreath, and I just kind of bend it and twist it. I think this just really adds a whimsical touch to this wreath. And then for my last step, I'm going to cut off some of the little sprigs of greenery off of this floral stem, and then I am going to just place them around the wreath, and there's not a lot of them, but it's just enough just to fill in a few of those blank spaces and just give it a higher end look. I'm loving how this wreath is looking. I saw one in Hobby Lobby that was selling for $30, and even at 40% off, you're paying close to $20, and I spent less than $10 to make this one. It's just such a fun, whimsical wreath, and with all those pastel spring Easter colors. And like I said, I love how that Easter garland just really finishes it off, and I think it just makes the whole wreath. So I'm really happy with this. I will be using one of these 3D wreath forms from Dollar Tree. This is a larger one. I'm actually using the smaller one. I believe it's an 8-inch, or maybe it's a 10-inch. It's the smallest one Dollar Tree carries. I will also be using 2 of these pillar candlesticks, as well as some miscellaneous spring florals that I also picked up at Dollar Tree. And I will be using some of these cascading florals. These are some I had on hand from last year, but I do believe I have seen them this year as well. And I'll be using some leaves from this eucalyptus garland. These are new at my Dollar Tree. And I'll be finishing my project off with this cute little ceramic bunny from this craft kit. I'm going to start by gluing the 2 bottoms of my candlesticks together. I'm going to use some E6000 as well as some hot glue. That way the hot glue will hold it together while the E6000 is drying, and I can continue working on my project. So this is what the 3D wreath form looks like when you get it from Dollar Tree. I had already attempted to assemble the smaller one, so I just wanted to show you. It comes with these 2 little like aluminum clips. You're supposed to unfold the wreath form, and then you use that clip to put over the top and fold those little tabs down around each wire. Now, I don't know if it was just my smaller wreath form that was being obstinate, but I had a terrible time with this. The wires didn't want to stay in the little clips, and it was just kind of a disaster. So I had to come up with a different way to hold this together. So I am using some black zip ties, and you can get these at Dollar Tree. They have smaller ones. I couldn't find mine, so I'm using these larger ones, but I am going to use these to help hold this in place. And one thing I found with this, you don't want to pull them super tight, because then it kind of wants to collapse your wreath form. And so I put several zip ties around the wires and did them a little bit looser and then tightened them as I went. Then I used a pair of wire cutters and snipped off all the ends of the zip ties, as well as the wires from the wreath form that are poking down into the center. So now that I have my wreath form assembled, I'm going to glue it to the top of my candlestick. And I know the zip ties don't look pretty, but it won't matter because they're going to be covered up anyway. And again, I'm going to glue this with some E6000 as well as some hot glue. And the hot glue does not stick really well to the wires and the glass, but I went around and I kind of built it up a little bit to just give that 3D wreath form base to sit on while the E6000 was drying. And I did sit this aside and let it dry for about an hour before I continued on. Next, I'm going to start layering my florals, and I'm going to start with these cascading yellow flowers, berries. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but I'm going to remove them from the stem. And at first I cut them off, and then I ended up just pulling them all apart. So I am separating the greenery from the florals because I'm going to be using the yellow flowers first, and then I'll be adding the greenery later. So I just wanted to put in a few of these cascading flowers so that they would hang down from the bottom of the wreath form down almost to the table. And so I am just gluing in a few of these so that they are hanging down. Then I'm going to pull off a few of those eucalyptus leaves from that garland, and I'm going to glue them over the top of the zip ties in the middle, just kind of creating a little bit of a base to put my florals on. Next, I'm going to start placing my flowers in the center, and I always like to arrange them and get an idea of how I want them to look before I start gluing them in. And once I like the way they look, I'll just use some hot glue to secure them. Next, I'm going to come in with those little green pieces that we cut off of the yellow flowers, and I am going to glue them at the base of the wire wreath form, right at the edge of the flowers, so that they look like they're vines kind of growing up those wires. So while I was working on this, one of my wires just broke, and it was thankfully up toward the top, so glue was not going to work to fix this, so I used some black electrical tape and wrapped around the wire, and I'm going to disguise it with florals. Sometimes things don't always work as planned when you're crafting, and you gotta improvise. So before I add the florals to the top, I'm going to take my little ceramic bunny, and I am going to give him a coat of ivory chalk paint, just a white chalk paint. He does have a little hanger in the top of his head, like he's a little ornament. So I removed that, and I did fill the holes a little bit of hot glue. You could use some wood filler as well. And then, like I said, I'm just going to give him a coat of paint just to give him a little bit more of a finished look. Then I'm going to take a very little tiny bit of this light pink paint, and I am going to just add a little bit of an accent on the inside of his ears and a little bit on his nose. And I'm not really painting it, I'm more dry brushing it, just so it's just a little bit of a hint of pink. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of light gray paint, and I'm lightly dry brushing all over the bunny just to give it a little bit of texture. So now I'm going to start adding some florals to the top. I'm going to start with some more of those eucalyptus leaves. So my camera quit recording and I didn't realize it, but I had just taken my little bunny, and there's a hole in the bottom of him, and so I glued him over the top of the zip ties on the top of the wreath form. It worked great. I used E6000 and hot glue again. And then I am just adding in some more of the greenery, the little sprigs that I had cut off those yellow flowers. And then I'm adding a few more pieces of the yellow flowers as well. For this next project, I will be using one of these terracotta pots. These are the ones that come in a 2-pack. I believe they're about a 3-inch pot. And I'll be using a wooden birdhouse, as well as a 12-inch wooden dowel. I'll also be using these florals from Dollar Tree. I like these. They look like a Japanese cherry blossom or maybe a dogwood blossom, very spring-like. And I'll be using one of these chalkboard wooden stakes. And I also picked up this little bird from the miniature fairy garden section. I also needed something to add a little bit of weight, so I'm using these glass beads that I had on hand from Dollar Tree. You can also use rocks from Dollar Tree or just from outside. For my first step, I am going to find the center of the bottom of my birdhouse, and I'm just using a ruler to mark from corner to corner to find the center, and then I'm going to drill a hole the size of my wooden dowel. Next I'm going to take some dark brown paint and I am painting inside the birdhouse, just mainly the back side of it and on the sides, just so when you look in you don't see that light colored wood. Then I'm going in with some ivory colored chalk paint and painting the walls of my birdhouse. And then I'm going to use that same dark brown paint and paint the roof and the base of the birdhouse, as well as the little perches where the bird sits. And I'm not covering this fully. I want it to have a little bit of a worn look, so I'm letting some of the natural wood show through. But I also gave my dowel a coat of that brown paint as well. Next I'm going to add a little dry brushing to my walls of my birdhouse, and I picked up these little metal paint brushes at Dollar Tree because they look like they'd be really good for dry brushing, and this is the first time I've used them and I am liking how they are working. I wanted this to look a little bit more like a white birch tree, so I'm going a little bit heavier in a few spots with the dry brushing, just to look like that white bark. Next I'm going to paint my terracotta pot, and a trick I like to use is to seal the pot first. And you can use something like this liquid sealer, or you can use a spray sealer. And so this time I'm going to use the liquid sealer. I think it actually works a little bit better than the spray. And the reason I am doing this is because if you don't seal the terracotta pot, the pot will absorb your paint and it will take 4 or 5 coats to actually cover your pot. So this way I seal it first, and then it only takes about 2 coats of paint. Once the sealer has completely dried, then I'm going to give my pot a couple of coats of that same ivory chalk paint that I used on the birdhouse. And then when that paint is dry, I'm going to go back in and really lightly dry brush some of that dark brown paint on the pot as well. So now I'm going to push the dowel into the hole that we drilled in the bottom of the birdhouse, and I'm going to push the dowel all the way up till it hits the top of the birdhouse. And this worked perfectly. The hole was a little bit tight, and the birdhouse just sat on that dowel really tight and secure. I didn't even use any glue or anything. Next I'm going to secure the dowel into the pot, and the hole in the bottom of the pot is a little bit larger than the dowel, but I am going to use some hot glue and just attach this a little bit. You could just put foam in your pot and push this down into it. I decided to try it this way, so I'm adding some hot glue on the bottom of my dowel, and if you set your pot on something metal like this metal ruler, and then push this down into the hole, when the glue is set, it'll pop right off of that metal ruler. And so I am doing that, and then I am going to add some extra hot glue around the bottom of the pot, around that dowel, and then also on the inside of the pot. Then I'm going to add my glass beads around the dowel to help hold it in place, and also to give some weight to this so that it isn't top heavy. Then I'm going to cover up those glass beads with some green moss. And this is some Spanish moss that I picked up at Walmart, but you can get all kinds of moss at Dollar Tree as well. Next I'm going to add my florals, and I just cut off a couple of the branches off of this, and then I am just tucking them into the moss, and I didn't add glue or anything. They just stuck in here and stayed in place really well. So the first one I'm wrapping around the dowel, and then the second one I'm kind of placing so that it comes up a little bit on the side and the back of the birdhouse. And then I want it to look like the bird has built a nest inside the house, so I'm using a little bit of brown Spanish moss and tucking that in the lower hole of the birdhouse. I'm also going to embellish my pot a little bit just by adding some jute twine around the top rim. I'm going to wrap it around 3 times and then tie a little knot. Next, I'm going to make a little sign with that chalkboard stake, and I was going to use a chalk marker, but it was too thick to write what I wanted to write, so I am using some white paint and a really fine paintbrush, and I just freehanded the words "Home Tweet Home." I found these cute little birds in my stash. I think I picked them up at a craft store years ago. So I'm going to use those, but if you don't have them, you can use the little bird from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to add one little bird onto the top perch of my birdhouse, and then I'm going to add another one on the corner of the birdhouse. And then I tucked my little Home Tweet Home sign down into the moss inside the pot, and it's all finished. I think it is so cute. I will be using the wood bunny shape, and I'm going to remove the hanger from that. And since I couldn't find the gray chenille yarn at Dollar Tree, I picked up this large skein at Walmart. It was between $6 and $7. It's way more than I need, but I will have it on hand to make more projects. I'm going to be wrapping my bunny in this yarn, so I am securing it to the back with my hot glue gun, and then I'm just going to start wrapping. So I'm going to start at the base of the ears and work down first, and I'm going to wrap it around fairly tightly and then just secure it with hot glue wherever it needs it to help hold it in place. One suggestion, and something I wish I would have done, is to paint the bunny shape a light gray color first, because then it will be easier to wrap the bunny and not have unfinished wood showing through. Once I get to the feet, I am going to just continue so that the main body part is covered, and I'm not going to worry about covering all parts of the feet because I'm going to be going over them again. So I'm just finishing off the body and making sure that it is all covered with yarn. Next, I'm going to take my yarn and I am going to wrap it kind of in a diagonal direction across the feet. And I'm doing this just to give it some dimension and just make it a little bit more interesting. Once I have the feet done, then I'm going to basically do the same thing with the ears. So I'm going to attach the yarn at the base of the ears on the back side and then just wrap it around.
And again, I did use some hot glue to secure it when necessary, and then at the very tips of the ears, I used hot glue to finish it off. So now my whole bunny is wrapped in the chenille yarn, and I had quite a bit of yarn left over. So I think a couple of skeins from Dollar Tree would be plenty if you can find it. But I have a lot left over to use for another project. To finish my bunny off, I'm going to use this burlap ribbon that is also from Dollar Tree just to tie a bow around one of the ears. So that's all there is to this cute little bunny, but now we need to make a little something to go along with her. So I'm going to be using this little galvanized bucket from Dollar Tree, and I'll be using these twine carrots, as well as one of these little chalkboard picks. These come in a 4-pack from Dollar Tree. I'll be using a little bit of floral foam and also some of this green Spanish moss. This is from Walmart, but you can pick up moss at Dollar Tree. I'm going to start by cutting a piece of my floral foam and putting it into my bucket, and I want it to only go about halfway up the bucket. So I don't want it to go all the way to the top. I just need a little bit in the bottom as a filler. Then I'm going to add a little bit of moss, just enough to tuck down around that piece of foam to hide it. Then I'll place a few of my carrots kind of randomly in the top of the bucket. I'm going to put 5 in there. Typically an odd number is what you would want. Then I'm going to make my little sign using the little chalkboard pick. And Dollar Tree does carry these chalk writers. However, they have a pretty wide tip and they're hard to write on small things with. So I use a chalk marker that I picked up at, I believe, Michael's quite a while ago. I've had them for years and they last forever, but they have a more fine tip and they're easier to write on smaller items. Then I'm going to just poke that down into the foam that's in the bottom of the bucket so it will stand up. And then I'm going to add a little bit more of the moss just to build it up, and I want to make it a little bit more messy and more organic looking. For this DIY, I am going to be using this placemat from Dollar Tree, and all of my supplies are from Dollar Tree unless I tell you otherwise. I'm also using a piece of foam core board. This is a scrap from a poster that I had, and I just cut it down to size to fit the placemat. And you can see I didn't round the corners because they're not going to show anyway. And I also will be using some of these 5-gallon paint stir sticks. These I did get from Walmart. They come in a 3-pack for about $1.20 or so. I will be using 12 of these natural wood beads from this bead garland. The paint I will be using is this Rust-Oleum chalk paint in the color Chiffon Cream. I got this from Walmart. It comes in a regular little paint can, but I like to keep it in a jar because I hate dealing with those paint can lids. And I'm going to be using some Waverly Antique Wax. I have a few spring flowers from Dollar Tree. These are just from my stash. I'm trying to use up things that I already have at home, so I just picked out some fun little spring flowers. Now I'm going to take my placemat and I'm going to hot glue it to the foam core board. If you do use hot glue, make sure that you work quickly so that you can smooth out your hot glue and not get any raised areas that show from that glue underneath the placemat. Next, I'm going to cut two of my paint sticks down to be the same length as the short sides of my placemat. And so I'm going to just use a pencil and mark where I need to cut those off. And then I'm also going to do the same with two paint sticks for the long sides. And then I'm going to use my miter box and saw to cut down my paint stir sticks. All of the crafting tools that you see me use in my video, I do have those linked in the description box below under my favorite crafting tools if you are interested in finding some of those. My newest one is this little handheld vacuum. It is rechargeable, just like with a USB, and it cleans up glitter and sawdust, and it's just really cute and affordable and very helpful. I did take some sandpaper and just smooth out those ends of the paint sticks where I cut them off just to get rid of any splinters. And I should have waited until after doing this to use my little vacuum, but this just means I get to use it again. Next, I'm going to take my chiffon cream chalk paint and I'm going to paint my stir sticks. And because I am an impatient crafter, I like to use my heat tool to dry my paint. And just so you know, when your paint is dry, it will no longer feel cold to the touch. So if even after blowing hot air with the heat tool on it, you touch it and it still feels cold, that means it's still not completely dry and you need to dry it a little bit longer. So I was planning on using the Waverly Antique Wax, which is a brown color, to dry brush on my paint stir sticks. But I noticed that the placemat actually has more grays and black in it. So I'm going to use this black chalk paint instead. And I'm going to put just a little bit on a dry brush, take the excess off on a paper towel, and then just lightly brush over my paint stir sticks. This will give it a little bit of an aged look and really give it that farmhouse feel. Once those are dry, I am going to glue those to my placemat to make a frame. So I will start with the shorter sides and just glue those flush with the edges of the placemat. And then the longer sides, I have to hang off of the edge a little bit so that they don't cover up any of the design of my placemat. So I'm just putting a little bit of hot glue on the very ends of those shorter sides and gluing the longer stick to that. So I think this is looking really cute with the frame, but I want to add a little bit of extra embellishment. So I'm going to use some Dollar Tree florals and just add them to the back of the truck. And I thought this would be really pretty if you had dried flowers, but I didn't have any dried flowers on hand, and I'm trying to use what's in my stash. That was my New Year's goal for this year. So I'm doing pretty good so far. To make a hanger for my picture, I am going to use some of these wood beads and some jute twine, and I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue on the end of my jute twine so I can easily string the beads on it. But I'm just going to put 12 of the wood beads on here. I'm not going to paint them. I'm going to leave them the natural color, and I'm going to put 6 on each side and just tie knots in the end of my jute twine and attach those to the back of the frame about 3 inches in from each side. And I think this just really adds just that cute finishing touch. What a cute wall art piece this placemat made. I love the design. I love the saying. I even love that it says happy on the little license plate on the back of the truck. Such a cute farmhouse spring decor piece. I picked up this little truck at Family Dollar after the fall season. I paid $2.50 for it. So make sure you're watching for these after the season is over at Dollar Tree Plus or at Family Dollar and see if you can get a deal. I'm also going to be using more of my spring florals for this DIY, as well as some of these small little glass containers and little tin containers. And I'll be using 2 of the wider craft sticks and about a 6-inch piece of dowel. To paint some of my containers, I will be using this Rust-Oleum Forged Hammered Spray Paint in the color Burnished Amber. It looks kind of like a metal finish, and then I'll also be using some of the Waverly Antique Wax. These I both picked up at Walmart. I'm going to start by prepping my little containers. So I am going to be using all 6 of these little metal tins as well as all 4 of the little glass jars. I'm going to remove the lids from the 4 glass jars and then I'm going to give them a couple of coats of that metal finish spray paint. For the little tins, I am going to remove the lids off of 3 of those tins, and then I am going to glue the one without a lid to the top of one that has a lid. And then I'm going to actually glue the lid that I took off on the bottom of each of those so that I'm making them taller, but so that the top is open, so I'll be able to put little flowers in it. So hopefully that makes sense, but I'm just creating a taller looking, kind of like a bucket is what I'm kind of going for here. And then I didn't show it here, but I did dry brush a little bit of black paint onto those little metal tins. Next, I'm going to add some florals to my little tins to make different buckets full of flowers. And so before I did that, I decided I did want to add a little bit of jute twine to the top of those glass bottles that I painted. And then I'm going to add just some small pieces of my florals, different color in each bottle or tin. And then I'm going to repeat this until all of my little bottles and tins are full of flowers. So now I'm going to take my little truck and remove all of those fall florals. I love the color of this truck. It's perfect and it even matches that DIY I did with the placemat from Dollar Tree. So I'm going to remove all of these and I'm not going to worry so much about not being able to get all of the glue off of the bottom of this because ultimately it's not going to show. So I'm going to take my craft sticks and I'm going to cut off the round end off of one side. Then I'm going to measure and cut that to the same length as the truck bed. And I'll repeat that with the second craft stick as well. Next, I'm going to take my little dowel piece and I'm going to measure so that it sticks up a little bit higher than the craft stick, even leaving a space below the craft stick. And I just marked this and then I'm going to cut 4 pieces the same length. I think they ended up being about 1.5 inches. Then I'm going to take my Waverly Antique Wax and I'm going to give both the craft sticks and the 4 little dowel pieces a nice coat of this. I like this antique wax because it looks like stain. You could use wood stain. You could also use just a brown craft paint watered down a little bit. And so I just paint some on there and then wipe the excess off with a paper towel to give it that nice stained look. Once my little wood pieces are dry, I am going to attach the dowels to the sides of the truck, just 2 on each side. And I'm just eyeballing this. You can measure if you want to, but I just kind of eyeballed it to make sure they were kind of even. And I'm going to attach it using some Gorilla Hot Glue. And then I will attach one of my craft sticks on each side. Then I'm going to arrange all of my little buckets and containers of flowers in the back of the truck. And I did feel like some of them needed to be raised up a little bit. So I got some of these wood rounds that I had on hand from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use them underneath a few of the shorter ones. Just glue those down in the bed of the truck and then glue the little container of flowers on top of those just to raise them up. And then I just attach them all into the back of the truck, and that's all there is to it. I think this is so adorable and I love how it turned out. For this next project, I'm going to be using one of these wood crates from Dollar Tree. This is one of the bigger ones. And then I'm also going to use 2 of these terracotta pots. These come in a set of 3 from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using this Farm Fresh Flowers rub-on transfer and a couple of these floral stems. Some other supplies I will be using are some floral foam as well as some Spanish moss. This is some I had from another project, but you can pick that up at Dollar Tree. And then I'll be using my chiffon cream chalk paint. And of course, a little bit of the Waverly Antique Wax for dry brushing. I'm going to start by giving my crate a paint of that chiffon cream chalk paint, and I did paint the whole outside of the crate, but on the inside I only went down along the sides down to about where the little handles start, because the inside of the crate, the bottom is not going to show at all. And of course, I am going to use a little bit of that Waverly Antique Wax and dry brush this. You can use any brown craft paint, but you know I love to dry brush my projects because it just adds that aged look and gives it some texture. And it's just such an easy technique to do, and it goes a long way. And of course, it's perfect for that farmhouse look. And once my paint is completely dry, I am going to add my rub-on transfer. And you really want to make sure your paint is dry on your project before you try to do a rub-on transfer, or else it might try to pull off the paint off of your project. So I've had that happen before, and it's kind of frustrating when you're trying to get the transfer to stick and it's just pulling the paint off your project. I did try several different tools for rubbing on my transfer, and I actually found that the thing that worked the best was this staple remover. And I love this tool. I use it all the time for all kinds of things. It's great for removing staples, but it's a very versatile crafting tool also. And this worked really well on my rub-on transfer. And I think the key with these rub-on transfers is just to be patient and take your time and make sure that you get all of it stuck down and transferred off of that film onto your project before you try and lift it up. And you'll get much better results if you're patient. And then I'm going to spray this with a couple coats of this matte clear sealer just to help that transfer stay on. Once the sealer is dry, I'm going to add my floral foam. So I'm going to cut this down so that it fits just below the handles of my little crate. I have found the metal rulers from Dollar Tree are great for cutting these floral foam blocks. They just kind of slice right through it, and then I don't have to use like a kitchen knife or something like that. Next, I'm going to take my two terracotta pots and place them on top of that floral foam, and I will secure them with a little bit of hot glue so that they aren't wobbling around. Then I'm going to take my Spanish moss and I'm going to use that to cover up all of that floral foam wherever it's showing. I'm just going to tuck that down inside the crate to cover that up. Spanish moss is so messy to work with, but I love the way it looks. And I now have my little handheld rechargeable vacuum that I can use to clean this up. I'm telling you, this is the best thing. Where has this been all of my life? So now I'm going to insert my little floral stems into my pots. I'm not even like cutting these apart or anything. I'm just bending up the wire stem so that it fits in the pot at the height that I want. I'm going to trim that off, and then uh, I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue to secure it to the bottom of the pot so it doesn't fall over, and that's it. This project is finished and it was so easy, but look how cute it is. For this project, I will be using this sign from Dollar Tree, and I really like how it has the 3 panels and it is already pre-stained with that dark wood stain. I'll also be using 2 of these little plastic planters. These come in a 3-pack at Dollar Tree. I'm going to use some florals that I just had on hand. You can use any kind of spring florals that you'd like. And I'll be using my Chiffon Cream Rust-Oleum chalk paint. And also some spray paint, chalk paint in the same color. The first thing I'm going to do is cut my little planters in half. And so you definitely want to make sure you have the thin plastic planters so that it is easy to do this. I'm going to turn my planter upside down on a piece of paper and trace around the top of the planter. Then I'm going to cut out that circle and fold it in half. This is going to help me determine kind of where the halfway point is on my planter. I'm going to set my planter back on that half circle and mark the edges of the planter with a Sharpie marker right where that fold is on the center of that circle, that paper. And then I'm going to just kind of eyeball a line that goes up and over the planter at the halfway point, just trying to get this as straight as possible. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just close. Then I'm going to use my razor knife and cut the planter in half along that line. It is a little bit stubborn along the rim and then the bottom of the planter, just because the plastic is thicker there. So I did take a pair of wire cutters and kind of snip that to cut through the rim. Do want to be careful though, because you can crack the planter. And I am cutting both of the little planters in half. Now that I have my planters cut in half, I'm going to use a pair of scissors and just try to even up the edges a little bit, because I want them to be as flat as possible so that they will sit flush up against my sign. I am just using 3 halves of the planters, and now I'm going to take them out and give them a good couple of coats of this spray paint. While I'm waiting for my spray paint to dry, I'm going to take my sign and I'm going to use a little bit of that chiffon cream chalk paint and dry brush some of that on top of the sign, just to kind of tone down the dark brown wood stain that's already on that and give it more of a farmhouse look. I did end up giving my planters about 3 light coats of spray paint, and now that that's completely dry, I'm going to use some Antique Wax by Waverly and this little dry chippy brush from Dollar Tree. This is the best brush for dry brushing, and I'm going to go over my planters to distress them and antique them as well. And now I'm going to attach my pots to the sign. I am leaving about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch at the bottom of the sign, and I'm using some hot glue to attach this, just trying to be very careful not to get too much glue so it's not squishing out the sides. Now that I have my pots on my sign, I'm going to take my florals and decide which ones I want to put in which pots. Just going to cut off the pieces of the florals and just start arranging them in the little pots. I really love how farmhouse this is. I love that I can change it out for the different seasons. And it was just really simple and quick and easy and inexpensive to make. For this project, I will be using this unfinished wood cross that I picked up at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using these little laser cut words also from Dollar Tree. In fact, everything, including this garland, is from Dollar Tree, except this greenery. I had this on hand. And this sign is also from Dollar Tree. I love the finish on this and the size. For $1.25, that's an amazing deal. I'm going to start by removing the jute twine hanger and the label off of the back of the cross. I guess I really didn't need to remove the label because it's not going to show at all, but it's just a habit. Next, I'm going to take my little berry garland and I'm going to kind of figure out the size and how much I need to go around about 3 times and trim that off. And then I am going to just wind that and my little pieces of greenery into a wreath. And so this is just really easy to do. You don't need any extra wire. You can just use that garland because it is wired to form the wreath. So now I'm going to use some jute twine and I'm going to wrap that around the top of the wreath probably 6 or 7 times. And then I'm going to put it through the hole in the top of the cross and wrap it around through that hole over the top of the cross about 3 or 4 times just to uh, hang it from that cross and just fill up that hole and kind of disguise it. And then I'll secure that on the back using some hot glue and trim off the excess twine. I'm going to position the cross more toward the left side of the sign so that I have room for my word rejoice on the right side. Then I'm going to attach both of these pieces using my Gorilla Hot Glue. I'm really liking the way this project looks with the natural wood tones. What do you think? Would you like to see it with more color or are you liking the natural look as well? Leave me a comment and let me know. And now on to the next project. I'm going to be using this really cute sign from Dollar Tree. And I'll be using 1 package of these twine carrots. There are 6 in a package. I'll also be using some of the Dollar Tree square wood beads as well as some of the round wood beads. I ended up using 20 of the square beads and 30 of the round ones. And I'll also be using about 5 feet of this jute twine. So as I said before, this sign is really cute, but I'm actually going to take the little bunny garland off of the sign and use that for this project. I'm going to remove all of the bunnies from the twine that they were on, and I am going to set aside the 2 bunnies that have burlap on them because those I'm going to leave just the way they are. Then I'm going to take the 3 bunnies that have the pattern and colors on them and I'm going to paint them with several coats of linen white chalk paint. This is of course totally optional. If you like the colors and the patterns, then by all means you can leave them that way. I just was going for more of a neutral farmhouse look, so that's why I decided to paint mine white. Once the paint on these has dried, I'm going to line them all up along with my carrots and just arrange them with my beads so that I know how I'm going to string them onto my twine. So the first thing I'm going to do is tie a knot in one end of the twine so that they won't slide off as I am threading them onto the twine. And I'm not going to put the carrots on now. They are going to get glued onto the twine later. So I am going to start by threading on my beads. I'll have 5 beads and then a bunny. And then I will have 5 beads again. And then there would be a carrot there, or there will be, but then I'll do 5 beads. So I'm actually, while I'm threading this, I'm going to have 10 beads in between each of the bunnies. And then we're going to add the carrots here in a little bit. And the reason I did it this way is because I just wasn't sure of like the spacing and how much room it was all going to take up. And so I figured I'd just thread on the beads and the bunnies, and then I could glue the carrots on later. However, after I completed this garland, I think I totally could have just glued the carrots on as I went. So it works either way. So now that I have all of my wood beads and my bunnies on my garland, I'm going to start adding my carrots in between, and I'm going to actually fold down the green raffia that is the uh, greenery at the top of the carrots. I'm going to put a little hot glue in there, and then I'm going to kind of sandwich that twine in between that to glue the carrots to the twine. And this worked really well.
For this project, I picked up 3 of these little glass jars with the pull-off lids, and these were in the kitchen section at Dollar Tree. I also got 3 of these flowers with the bulbs on them. It just says floral bulb. They had these, and then they had some irises and maybe some other flowers as well. I'll be using some jute twine. You can pick this up at Dollar Tree. And some Spanish moss, which I also got at Dollar Tree. And then my supplies are just scissors and a hot glue gun and glue sticks. I'm just going to remove the lid from these jars, and I'm not going to be using them for this project. I'll probably keep them though, because I might reuse these jars for another project at some other time. And then I'm just going to wrap some of the jute twine around the top of the jar, and I'm just going to wrap it around 5 or 6 times until it kind of covers that top rim of the jar. Then I'm just going to tie that into a bow, and I did kind of center the bow on the front of the jar. These jars have like a little place where you could put a label, and it kind of looks like the front of the jar. So I did try to center my bow above that, and then I did add just a little bit of hot glue to hold the bow in place. Next, I'm just going to take a little bit of the Spanish moss and put it in the bottom of the jar. I don't want to put too much in the jar because I want the bulbs that are on the bottom of the flowers to show. So this is just a little bit to cover the bottom of the jar. Then I'm going to take my flower, and the bulb that is on the bottom of the flower has these little, looks like little roots on it. They were a little bit too long, and so I just trimmed mine off a little bit. And then I'm going to make a place in the center of the moss, kind of hollow it out, because I'm going to add some glue to the bottom of the bulb and then glue it down, because I want this to stand up straight, and it won't stand up if I just stick it in there. So it does need a little bit of glue to hold it in place. Then I just repeat this process with the other 2 flowers, and I have a set of 3 that look really cute. They'd look cute on a side table or in a centerpiece, and I actually put mine in a tray that I got at Target for $5, I believe, in their dollar spot, and I just added some green Spanish moss to the bottom and then put these jars
in there, and I just think it makes a beautiful spring centerpiece. The next project is this really easy faux succulent terrarium, and everything it's made with is from the Dollar Tree. For this, I picked up one of these plastic hanging terrariums, one of these bags of stones. I also had some reindeer moss from the Dollar Tree on hand, and this is the lighter colored moss, and I like the texture of this, so that's why I'm using it. And then I'm going to be using 2 of these faux succulents. These are the smaller ones that come in the pots. And then also some jute twine. So the first thing I'm going to do is take some of my stones, and I'm just going to pick out some of the ones that I wanted to use. I want the smaller stones and more of the lighter browns, and less of the black stones. So I just picked out what I thought looked nice. Then I'm going to take a little bit of the reindeer moss, and I'm just going to put a couple little bunches in on top of the stones. Then I'm going to remove the succulents from the little pots, and they just pull right out of the styrofoam. Then take some wire cutters and trim off the stem, and then I'm just going to set these in there. I don't even glue them in, I just set them in and kind of nestle them down into the moss. And since I'm not planning on hanging mine, I'm going to do a little bit of an embellishment on the top hanger part. You could still do this even if you were going to hang it, but I'm just taking some jute twine and I'm going to glue the end to the base of that hanger at the top, and then I'm just going to wrap it around, and I'm going to wrap it around a few times on that base, and then I'm going to go around the loop on the top. And this does take a little bit of time. You have to thread it through each time, so you can't leave the twine on the spool. You'll have to cut off a piece of twine so that you can thread it through, but I really like the look of how it turns out once you're finished. Once I'm finished wrapping it, I'm just going to secure the end with a little bit of hot glue and trim it off.
The next project is this beautiful Easter wall art.
I will be using this 11 by 14 inch photo frame from Dollar Tree. And I will also be using this 11 by 14 inch canvas board. This is, I think, the largest size that Dollar Tree carries. I'm going to be using one of these cathedral window wall art pieces from Dollar Tree. If you can't find these, don't worry, you'll still be able to do this project. And then I'm going to use these pretty little roses that I found at Walmart. I think I paid like $1.49 or something for these. And to paint this project, I'm going to be using some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory and also in ink. And then I will also be using some brown acrylic craft paint. So to start out, I'm going to give my canvas a coat of the ivory chalk paint. I'm using a foam brush and I'm just going over this pretty quickly just to cover up the stark white with more of a softer off-white color. So next I'm going to remove that little sign that says Home Sweet Home off of the window decor piece, and then I am going to be using this just as a stencil basically. So I'm not actually going to be using this in the project as far as like gluing it to the project or anything. I'm just going to be tracing around it, so then I will have it to use in a different project. And so I am measuring so that I can get this centered, and then I will be tracing around the top part of the window. Now, if you can't find these at your Dollar Tree, I know a lot of you have been saying you haven't been able to find them. That's okay. You can find a picture of a similar type window just online and print that out and use it as a pattern, or just find, maybe even like Google a cathedral window coloring page maybe, or pattern or template. Just see what kind of images you can get to pull up and then print something out that is a shape that you like, and you can use that for a pattern. So now that I have that traced onto my canvas with the pencil, I'm going to take that brown acrylic craft paint and a flat brush, and I am going to paint this, and I'm not going to paint it like real dark and solid. I want this to look kind of like weathered wood. So I've watered down my paint just a little bit, and then I am getting a little bit of the paint off of the brush so that it doesn't paint too dark. And I'm starting lighter than I really want it to be because I can always add more paint. So I'm just going to go over this, and then if I want to make it darker, then I can go back over it again. So if you are new to my channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I do a lot of budget-friendly DIYs, a lot of Dollar Tree DIYs, and if you enjoy that type of thing, be sure to hit the subscribe button and stick around. Also, remember to hit that bell and set your notifications so that YouTube will notify you when I upload new videos. So I decided just to stop with what I have here. I like the looks of this, so I'm going to use a white eraser and erase those extra pencil lines that I have in there so it looks nice and neat. Next, I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom and put a mark on each side of the canvas. I'm going to draw a line across this. This is going to be a guide for my lettering, and then I am going to make a mark every 3 inches from that first mark that I made on both sides as well, to draw lines across the canvas. And these are going to be my guide for drawing my boards for making it look like shiplap. So next I am going to take a really small liner paintbrush and some of the ink chalk paint, and I have watered the paint down quite a bit so that it has a thinner consistency so that I can draw thin lines with it. And you can see I'm kind of testing that with my paintbrush to see if I have good control with the consistency of the paint. And if you don't like to paint like this, or you don't have a steady hand, you can use just a marker to draw these lines on if you're more comfortable with that.
Next, I'm going to use one of these metal paintbrushes from Dollar Tree. These have stiffer bristles and they are great for dry brushing. So I'm putting a little bit of the ink colored paint on my paintbrush and then wiping most of it off on the paper towel, and then I am rubbing it across the top of where I just painted those lines. You want to make sure that your lines are dry before you do this. And I'm going over the lines, specifically a little bit darker, just to highlight those lines, and then I am also dry brushing in between the lines just to give those boards a little bit of a distressed look. For my lettering, I thought about using some stickers, I thought about using some stencils. You can get all of these at Dollar Tree. I also thought about using my Cricut machine, but I wasn't sure how well the vinyl would stick to this rough canvas surface. So in the end, I decided just to get on my laptop and use the word processor, print out the lettering in a font and the size that I wanted, and I'm just going to go old school with this. And I'm going to go over the back of the paper where my lettering is with a pencil and just color over that so that I'm covering the whole area where the lettering is. And then I'm going to place this on my project where I want it, and I am going to just trace over my letters with a pencil, and then that is going to transfer the pencil on the back of the paper to my project so that I will be able to see where my letters are and use that as a pattern for copying the letters with a Sharpie marker. So then I'm just going to trace over the letters with a Sharpie marker, and this worked great. I was actually very surprised at how well the Sharpie marker wrote on the canvas. It didn't bleed at all, and it just went over that texture really well. So this was a really easy way to do the lettering. Next, I'm going to take that floral stem that I got at Walmart, and I pulled the leaves and the greenery off of it. I cut the little roses off, and then I am just arranging them and gluing them at the bottom of the window. Then the last step is to take the picture frame. I'm removing the back and I'm taking out the glass, and then I am going to place the canvas inside the picture frame. And my picture frame did come apart in the corner, so I did have to glue that, but once that was done, it was fine. And so I just placed the canvas inside the frame, added the back onto it so that I would still have the hanger, and then it was finished. That's it. So this piece could be set on a shelf or hung on the wall. You could also add your own hanger to it, but I love how it turned out. I am so happy with it. For this next project, I will be using this wooden cross. I found this in the Crafter's Square aisle at Dollar Tree. I'll also be using these flowers from Dollar Tree. They're called Crocus, and they are kind of a really pretty salmon color. And then I wanted something to fill in that cutout. I'm going to be using this, it's actually a paper. It almost looks like fabric. You could use fabric, but this is a specialty paper that I had left over from some projects. And then I am also going to be using that same brown craft paint that I used in the previous project. And for this, I'm going to be watering it down a lot, and I'm going to be using it like a stain. Now you could totally just use a stain for this. I kind of like using the acrylic paint watered down because it looks just like stain, but it is so much easier to work with. I think it's easier to clean up because it's water-based, and I just like using it. But if you prefer to use stain, then by all means use that. And I did go over mine twice just to give it a little bit of a darker shade. So now I'm just tracing around the cross on my paper, and I will cut that out and then glue that to the back of the cross. Next I'm going to add a few of the leaves, and then I will add some of the flowers to the base of the cross. And I felt like it needed a little something else, so I found these. They're called blossoming branches at Dollar Tree, but they look just like pussy willows. But I really liked the texture of these, and I felt like it kind of reminded me a little bit of a thorny bush or plant, which I thought with the cross was a really fitting thing to add in here. And so I really like kind of the contrast of this with the pretty flowers. I hadn't really planned it, but I really feel like the ruggedness of the cross and the kind of thorniness of these branches paired with the flowers and the elegant paper that I put in there just really is a great depiction of the pain and the beauty of what Jesus did for us on the cross. Next, I'm going to show you how to make this faux succulent garden, and then how you can transform it into this resurrection garden to celebrate Easter. To make this project, you're going to need a dish. This is a planter dish that I got at Dollar Tree. I'm also going to be using 2 different kinds of moss and some rocks and some faux succulents, also from Dollar Tree. I'm also going to be using some potting soil. I had some on hand, but you usually can find it at Dollar Tree as well. I'm going to start by layering some of the stones in the bottom of my dish. And then I'll go ahead and add some of that potting soil. Next, I'm going to take my darker green moss and I'm going to cover the potting soil with this. Then I'm going to pull my little succulents out of the little pots. They just pull right out of the styrofoam. And then I'm going to poke them down into the moss and the dirt, just placing them wherever I think it looks nice. I also had this faux succulent pick that I decided to leave all of the little pieces together. I'm just going to shorten the stem so that it will fit down inside of the soil. But this is going to add a little bit of height to my garden, and I really like the way that looks. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the lighter colored reindeer moss, just a little bit here and there to add some variation. And I'll add a few stones in this, and I think this just makes a nice little desktop or tabletop garden that doesn't require any care. So now let me show you how to transform it to a resurrection garden for Easter. I will be using one of these small terracotta pots. These come in a 3-pack from Dollar Tree, some black craft paint, and then also you'll need a stone that's about the same size as the top of the terracotta pot. And then I'm going to use some sticks that are from my yard. To start, I'm just going to paint the inside of my terracotta pot. Then I'm also going to paint the outside of just the rim. I'm not going to paint the whole outside of the pot, just the top rim. And while my paint is drying, I'm going to take my sticks and make the crosses. I'm going to make one of the crosses a little bit larger. This is going to be the center cross, and then I'll make the other two about the same size. So this just kind of depends on your sticks. Just break them and glue them together with some hot glue until you are happy with the size and the way they look. Once the paint is dry on my little pot, I'm going to take my succulent garden, and then I'm going to remove some of the succulents out of this, and I'm just going to do this carefully. I don't want to completely take this apart, but I'm going to remove most of the things off of the top, and then I'm going to position my terracotta pot on its side and the stone next to it. And then I'm going to use some of my moss to kind of go over the top of the pot so it hides the part of the pot that hasn't been painted. And so I am adding some extra moss to cover this up. Once I have a nice mound of moss over the top of that terracotta pot, I am going to place my crosses in the back of the garden pot. And then I am going to start adding my succulents and some of the smaller rocks back in. I'm not going to add all of the succulents in just because with the crosses and the terracotta pot, there's really not room for all of them. So I'm just rearranging it until I'm happy with how it looks. And the nice thing about this is once Easter is over, you can take out the crosses and terracotta pot and you can store those away with your Easter items and then just put your succulent garden back to the way it originally was and use it all year round. But I really do love having this reminder of what Easter is really all about and how Jesus died on the cross for our sins. And after the third day, he rose again. He conquered sin and death, and we can have eternal life if we just believe in him. Easter bunnies and eggs are fun, but this is the true meaning of Easter.
For this project, I will be making this set of wall hooks and using the Cricut to customize them for spring. The materials I will be using are this sign from Dollar Tree. It is one of the longer, skinnier signs, as well as 3 of these wall hooks that I also picked up at Dollar Tree. I got 3 different shapes of these, but they all have the same type of hook on them. I will also be using 2 of the larger 5-gallon paint stir sticks, some white chalk paint, and also some pastel colored chalk paint or acrylic craft paint will work as well. And of course I will use my Cricut cutting machine to customize my wall hooks. For this project, I'm going to be using the Smart Vinyl, and while Cece the cat doesn't seem to be too impressed, I love the Smart Vinyl because you don't have to use a mat in order to cut your design. I'm going to start by removing all of the hooks, hangers, and labels off of my little signs, and I will save those hooks and hangers because I will be reusing them. I'm also going to remove the hanger and the embellishments from my long sign as well. Next, I'm going to glue my paint stir sticks on what's the front of this sign, but it's going to be the back of my sign. And I am using some Gorilla Hot Glue. I would also recommend adding a little bit of E6000 just to give this a stronger hold. Adding these stir sticks to this sign is really going to provide some stability because the Dollar Tree sign is not real thick and so it's a little bit flimsy. I'm also going to add a little bit of hot glue into those holes where the hanger was just to fill them. You could use wood filler. I kind of like using the hot glue and then I just sand off anything that is not smooth. Then I'm going to paint my sign using my white chalk paint, and on what will be the back of my sign, I'm going to give this several coats just to give it a nice finished look. And then on the front of my sign, I'm going to lay out where my hooks will be, and then I'm going to only paint what will show on the board, not underneath where I'm going to glue these hooks. That way when I glue them down, it will be a stronger bond. And then I'm going to take a little bit of black chalk paint and a dry brush, and I'm just going to lightly dry brush over the tops of my white paint just to give this a little bit of a worn, aged look. Next, I mixed some of my pastel paints with a little bit of white to kind of lighten them up, and then I'm painting my signs. I was going to do one in each of these colors, but I decided not to do the pink and just to do the yellow and the lavender. And now that the paint is dry on these, I'm going to dry brush these with a little bit of white paint, just very lightly, just to kind of lighten them up and give them a little bit of dimension as well. To add a little bit of a border, I'm just using a Sharpie marker and going around with a little bit of a broken line around each of my signs. So now I'm going to jump into Design Space, and this is where you can create your own designs or you can use ones that are already in Design Space. They have hundreds of free designs. They also have some that you can pay a little extra for, but you can put these on your canvas and then resize them and just customize it however you want it to be. And when you're ready to cut out your design, Design Space will walk you through each step to choose your materials and to cut out your design. Since I'm using the Smart Vinyl, I am going to use this tray that is also from Cricut. You do not have to use this tray, but it is very handy. So I'm going to put my vinyl in this and feed it under the cutter and into the machine. And then I'm going to let Cricut do all the work of cutting out my design. Now that my design is cut, I'm going to peel back what I don't need. And I started to do this, but I decided it would be easier if I cut each design apart. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to weed out all of the parts that I don't need. Then I'm going to take some transfer tape and cut it the size of my design. Then I will peel the backing off of the transfer tape and apply it to the design. And I'm going to just make sure that I get as few wrinkles and bubbles as possible. And then I will go over it with my burnishing tool just to make sure that it is adhered to the design very well. To apply the design to my project, I'm going to peel back the backing of the transfer tape, and you may have to go over it a little bit with your tool if it doesn't want to release, but then I'm going to just peel that back carefully, and then I'm going to position my design on my sign and go over it with my burnishing tool and then peel off that top of the transfer tape, and it leaves the design on my project. I'm going to be using the same technique to place one of these flowers on each of the lavender signs as well. Then I'm going to add my hooks back onto my signs. And before I attach the signs, I am going to add the hangers on the back of my sign to use these to hang my wall hooks. So I'm just reusing the ones that were on the back of those hooks to begin with. Next, I'm going to use some E6000 to glue these signs to my backing, and I'm also going to use a little bit of hot glue just so that will adhere right away while that E6000 is drying. For this next project, I'm going to be using the Cricut to make these beautiful paper flowers. To frame my flowers, I will be using these frames that came from Dollar Tree that have the cute bead hangers already on them. And I'll be using a piece of patterned paper as a background. I found this yellow ranunculus flower project and I printed out the instructions as well as the design on my printer, and then I am using the Cricut to cut out these flowers. I love how much time this saves because I don't have to cut out each one of these flower petals with a pair of scissors. I also love that the projects come with instructions on how to assemble them. So to assemble these flowers, I am going to take a little ball of paper and I'm going to use this to start forming my flowers. I'm going to take the smallest petal and just fold the petals up around that little paper ball. And it's totally okay to kind of crinkle them and squish them up because that's what gives this flower a more realistic look. Then I'm going to add a drop of hot glue to the bottom of my little ball, and I'm going to put the next size up petal on, and I'm kind of rotating them so they don't all line up all at the same way, and then I'm going to just kind of fold those petals up and squish them together, and I'm going to continue this with all 8 of the petals. And just a little tip, I did print these off on an off-white cardstock, kind of a beige color, so that it wasn't just white on the outside of the petals. Now I'm just going to remove that little paper ball from the center of my flower, and it is all finished. To prep my frames, I am going to sand them down because they do have kind of a shiny, smooth surface and I want the paint to stick to them, so I'm just going to sand them both down. I'm going to go ahead and remove the back from the frame, and I'm going to be painting my frames using this yellow chalk paint. And before I do, I am going to add a little bit of painter's tape around those beads that are right next to the frame because I do want to keep the beads a natural wood color. Once my yellow paint is dry, I'm going to take a dry chip brush and some white paint, and I'm going to do a heavy dry brush on this frame. I want it to not be so bright yellow, but I do want parts of that yellow paint just showing through. And then I'm going to take a little bit of antique wax from Waverly and I'm going to dry brush a little bit over the frame to give it that worn antique look. For the background for my flower, I'm going to take my patterned paper and cut out a square just the exact same size as that backing that we took out of the picture frame. And then I'm going to use just a regular glue stick and glue this right on top of that. Then I'll add that right back into the picture frame and glue my flower to the center, and this piece is done. And I did make a set of 2 of these, and I think they turned out beautifully. I love how easy the Cricut made it to make these paper flowers. In this next project, I will be using the Cricut to add faux leather floral accents to this spring centerpiece. For my vases, I am just using some jars that I had around the house, a couple of different sizes. And I'm going to be using this faux leather material from Cricut. This looks just like leather. It's thinner, but the Cricut machine cuts this out so nicely. And to add a little color to my jars, I'm going to be using some pastel patterned paper. So once again in Design Space, I found this project and I just thought this was so cute. So I'm just using my faux leather and I'm cutting that design out using the Cricut. And this is what I'm going to use to wrap around my jars. Next, I'm going to take my patterned scrapbook paper and I am going to cut some strips to go behind my faux leather flowers. So I am just kind of laying my flowers on there to see how wide I need my paper strips, and then I'm going to just cut them with my trimmer. And I do have one jar that is smaller, so I did size one of my flowers down a little bit, so I will be cutting one of my paper strips a little smaller as well. I'm going to use just some plain old Scotch tape to attach my paper around the center of each jar. And then I'm going to use my hot glue gun just to add a little bit of hot glue to secure my faux leather flowers on top of that strip of paper. And to finish off my jar, I'm going to just wrap some jute twine around the top about 3 times and tie a knot and then trim off the ends. And then I'll repeat this with the other 2 jars. To create a tray for my centerpiece, I'm going to be using this hexagon-shaped mirror from Dollar Tree, a piece of shiplap looking scrapbook paper that I got at Hobby Lobby, and some wired jute twine from Dollar Tree. I'm going to remove the mirror from the frame and I'm going to use it as a pattern to cut out a hexagon shape from my shiplap paper. And so I'm making sure that my lines are straight across there. And I'm going to just use a glue stick again to glue that to the back side of the mirror. This way, if I wanted to reverse this and make a mirrored tray, I could do that as well. I'm going to paint my frame with some of this chiffon cream chalk paint. It's an off-white color. I would recommend sanding down the frame a little to rough it up so the paint sticks a little better. I didn't do that and I probably should have, but I'm giving this kind of a rough coat because I do want some of the black to show through so that it looks like it's distressed. I also left the inside of the frame black because I wanted that contrast, and then I sprayed it with a clear matte spray. And then I put my mirror back into the frame so that the shiplap side will be facing up. Next, I'm going to make some handles for my tray. So I'm going to take my wired jute and I'm going to measure 6 inches and fold it over. And then I will fold it over again so that I have 3 strands that are 6 inches long. And then I am going to cut it off and then I'll twist those together tightly and bend it kind of in a little rainbow shape, and this is going to make my handle, and I'll make 2 of these. Then using my Gorilla Hot Glue, I am going to attach the handles straight across from each other on the outside of the frame. Then I set my vases on the little tray, and then I'm going to add some florals to them. But I just really love the contrast of that dark leather against those pastels around the vases. I just think that is so pretty. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to see more budget-friendly DIYs, then be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to set your notifications so that YouTube will notify you when I upload new videos.
Also, let me know in the comments which projects were your favorites.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a blessed day.